Now, in terms of TV, if Friday night, I suppose, is party night, that's why they don't put the good TV on Friday night, because everybody's out having parties. If Sunday night is Songs of Praise and Top Gear nights, I don't know which one of those two you watch, then Saturday night, my guess, is Talent Night. Have you noticed the train of the TV programmes on the Saturday night? The current fad or phase is singing or dancing talent shows, isn't it? So you've got all the X Factor and the Strictly and the Ice Thing and all of those. But when I was watching lots more TV on a Saturday night, it was slightly different. I was back in the age of gladiators. Do you remember that? So the talent was that, are you tough enough? Are you strong? But even better than gladiators was Blind Date. Now, put up your hand. Who was addicted? John, you've really come under trouble. Oh, dear. We loved it for Scylla. We loved it for our Graham. Blind Date, brilliant. And what, again, was the point of Blind Date? The point of Blind Date was that we got to see the talent on show. And you sort of, as you watched, there were the three contestants hidden from the person who gets to pick which of the three. And you know the way it always worked out. From right at the start, we were trying to guess who she would pick, or he pick. But we had the advantage, didn't we? We weren't behind the screen. So from these questions, or innuendo phrases, whatever you want to call them, she or he would try to figure out who was the most amusing, who was the most successful, the most fun, the most rich, the most intelligent, the most talented in one way or another. Meanwhile, we're all laughing at what they're wearing and the bizarre things that some of them did. My mate actually went on there. He got dumped out first off straight away, but we gave him loads for that. But who were the best ones? Which were they? We could sort of see whether they were beautiful or not. And then the window goes up, and then she finds, and then you get that look of shock, don't you? You remember some of them where, some of them would come and wearing feathers and everything, looking at, and there's this poor person who's vaguely normal, who's been sitting on the stool, stand next to each other, the thing goes away, and you've either got, or hey. So how does it work? We love the amusing, the successful. That was the one that they were after. We love the amusing, the successful, the fun, the rich, the intelligent, the beautiful, the strong, the dancers, the singers, the talented. Those are the ones we love. Which is fine if you are one of those people. If you are amusing, talented, gifted, successful, funny, dancing, all singing. But if you're not one of the beautiful people, and never get picked, as was always my fear in the school playground when you're picking teams. You didn't mind getting picked second to last, but the worst thing was being picked last, wasn't it? I won't tell you how many times that was my experience. If you're not one of the beautiful people, you ain't going to get loved, are you? That's frighteningly close to the bone for some of us, isn't it? If we're not what everybody else expects us or wants us to be, will we get loved? Now that's an important question for us today, because I want to ask this one. Is God like that? We've been trained to love people for what they do for us. But is God like that? Does he only love the lovely ones? Does he only love the ones who offer him something, who will pay some sort of dividend, who look good on the arm when he walks out? Because that's what Blind Date was all about, wasn't it? Now, I wouldn't blame you for thinking that God does. He's only interested in the good. He's only interested in the beautiful. He's only interested in the successful. I wouldn't blame you, and I think that's the fault of people who are already believers. So if you're somebody who hasn't made up your mind yet about the Lord Jesus, and you've got this idea into your head that actually God is only interested in good people, or at least says you've got to be good for me to be interested in loving you, then can I apologise to you for that? Because I think we've done a terrible disservice here. We've communicated this idea that God only loves the lovely. I think of an example of this. It was well-meaning by a minister who was desperate with a bunch of young ladies to encourage them not to go throwing themselves and their love and their bodies around to anything in a pair of trousers. And he did this in quite a stark way. He pulled out a rose, and it was a beautiful rose. It smelled beautiful. He put his hand and it was so soft and so gentle. He says, "What a lovely rose." And then he handed it and he says, "Listen, smell the rose. Touch those. Feel how beautiful that rose is." And he passed it down into the crowd of the girls who were listening. They passed it round and They smelt it and they touched it, and oh, what a lovely rose it was. And as they were passing it round, he proceeded basically to go off on one. He told them about sexual transmitted diseases. He told them about illegitimate children. He told them about wrecked lives. And as they were listening, they were like, whoa. And by this point, the rose has come back. It returns. And it was only a shadow of what it looked like before. He holds up the rose and he goes, who would want this? That's a good question, isn't it? Because here's a minister communicating that really God only wants the people who are all right, neat, still smell good, and are still nice to touch. Is that true? Is that what God is like? It makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit worried. Is he somebody who only loves the lovely, only loves the ones who pay a dividend? Now, can I tell you, there's no better place for us to look to try and get an answer to that question than in the book of Hosea. Because it is a love story, and it is unique in the Bible, and it shows not just what God is like as king and a judge, but as a lover of his people. So we're simply going to look at this section today, these few short verses under two headings, and they're going to come up here behind me. And we're going to see a love of God, a love that knows the worst, and a love that pays the cost. A love that knows the worst, and a love that pays the cost. So let's pick up the story again in Hosea's life. Hosea, it must have been very difficult to know how he was feeling at this point. Don't worry, if you want to stay in, he's very welcome, that's fine.
He doesn't know what to do.
Oh, bless him. I feel like that's having a beer sometimes, don't worry. Don't worry about kids making noise, they're welcome in here too. Do not worry and don't panic about it. Let's pick up the story. So for Hosea, it's not difficult to imagine how he was feeling at the moment. If we haven't ourselves, then we know people who have been betrayed by unfaithfulness in a marriage relationship. We know what it does. When somebody walks out on you in a relationship, it's not just that it's an injury, it's an insult, and your mind goes mad. Why have they gone there and not... What's wrong with me? It doesn't just generate tears, which it does many times, doesn't it? But it generates hate. The most kind and gentle person can look on that person who has taken away their spouse and say, I hate them. I don't know how, what has happened to me, but I hate them. It doesn't just generate tears, it generates hate. And I think that tells us something about what we all know deep down marriage is supposed to be like. Marriage is supposed to be exclusive. And marriage has this wonderful power to shape how you feel about yourself and the world. You see, there are in the world 5 or 6 people who are no problem at all. But actually, most of the time, we're not actually like that. We're probably not in that 5 or 6 people who are no problem at all. We all have worries, fears and insecurities. And if you're in a married life, your partner will see all of them. They'll see what you're like. What does that mean? It means that, say for example, if my wife was here. Now, we'll come to my wife in a minute. We'll get there in a minute. If I come to you, imagine if one of you guys come up to me at the end and say, Steve, you're really a nice bloke. A, that would be a miracle. And B, what I'd say is, fooled you. Because I can, can't I? I could probably spend a little bit of time persuading you that I'm a nice fella. But if my wife came up to me at the end and she said, Steve, you're really a nice bloke. I wish you would. Lovely. Whose opinion am I going to value most? It's going to be hers because she knows me at my best and she knows me at my worst. So if she thinks I'm all right, if she thinks I'm worth it, then that matters a whole lot more than if somebody else does. And this shapes our marriages. If you have got a strong marriage, you will go out into life with a place of strength. But if your marriage and you're struggling with that, if you've got somebody there and it weakens everything, it makes such a big difference. Why? Because marriage is supposed to be that relationship that is exclusive, that has a power within our lives, either for good or for ill. And here is poor Hosea, the bottom has fallen out of his life because somebody has been unfaithful. And it's probably at the point where he's long past, why me? What do I do? What have I got to change? He's probably at the point where he's just, good riddance. I've had enough. I'm better off without you. But then God comes to him. Can you see in verse 1? Look down and see it there. The Lord said to me, go, show your love to your wife again. Though she is loved by another and is an adulteress, love her as the Lord loves Israel. As the Lord loves Israel, though they have turned to other gods and loved the sacred raisin cakes. Go to her. Go give your life and your love to her again. If we're in any doubt what state she's in, it says there, to your lovers. It's the word paramour, which isn't that far off. Pimp, to tell you the truth. She's sold herself. She's given away to people who she thinks will deliver, and all they've done is sucked her dry and left her in a right state. She is not better off for being unfaithful. Please don't believe anybody who says you're ever better off by being unfaithful. You're not. Again, God says, go, love her again. Why, Lord? I can't have my heart dragged through the dirt again. Don't do this to me. Why? Answer, verse 2. Because I want you to embody what I'm going to do for my people. At the point where it is ridiculous that I would go after my people, that is exactly what I'm going to do. See, what she has done to you, Hosea, my people have done to me. They've gone off and worshipped other empty gods, given their heart away. And what you are to do for your wife, knowing the worst about her, knowing what she has done, I will do for my people. I'm going to go and love them again. Now, perhaps that surprises you as you listen. Because we're in a day and age where it's just, if they cause you any problem, get rid of them, trade them in for a better model. But perhaps this surprises you because you realise the impact of your sin, my sin, upon God. You don't ever think about that, do you? We very rarely do. You see, he has made you, as he made Israel, that nation, for an exclusive relationship with him. To love him, to be shaped by our relationship with him, to go out in strength into the world on the basis of a strong relationship with him, knowing him. But instead, we've set our hopes in everything but him, haven't we? We believe the promises of money, we believe the promises of comfort, career. Perhaps we put our hopes in a person, in the next holiday, in the quality of our garden. Those are the things that capture our imaginations. Those are the things that are the big highlights in our week. Those are the things we get up thinking about in the morning. Those are the things that if I have them, forget God, if I have them, they'll be the things that make me happy. And he knows, and it hurts him. Our sin impacts God. But second of all, we find here that we realise that our sin, our turning away from him, impacts us as well. You see, poor Gomer, the wife here, she's out of control, isn't she? We find in a minute that Hosea's got to go and buy her back, which means that she's got herself into some real trouble. And the price that we find she pays in a minute, he pays for her, is pittance. It's less than a normal slave. What does this mean? You see, by giving herself and setting her heart on lesser things than the love relationship she was made for with her husband, she sold herself to her lovers, and she's run to them, and they've taken the best from her. They've chewed her up and they've spat her out. They've rubbished her value. They've promised her life, and now they've served up death to her. And she is utterly helpless. Let me ask you a question. What have you put yourself in the arms of? What do you set your hopes and your aspirations on? It may well be a good thing, because there's nothing wrong with having a bit of money and being comfortable and having a career, having a nice garden and a good holiday. But when you want them too much and they become the focus and the drive and the direction of your heart and your life, if they become bigger than God to you, then they are your God. They're what you worship. They're what you go for. And they'll only ever make you pay, as they did with Gomer. You see, your money can't save you, can it? Particularly at this time. All your money can do is curse you with a sense of its absence, can't it? Oh, if only I had more. So you go back and try a bit harder, get a bit. And it does it. It never fulfills. It never satisfies. I spoke with a friend of mine this week. I haven't seen him in quite a while. He's a natural businessman. His career has already cost him one marriage, and he was telling me, as we walked down the road over there, that it's on the verge of costing him another relationship too. Yet he can't help himself. He runs after his business all the time. And the Lord knows how unfaithful we are to him in the way that we chase after all these other things. They promise so much but sap life out of us. And yet he says to Hosea, go to your wife, because that's what I'm going to do with my people. Once again, though they've been unfaithful, I'm going to go. I know the worst about you, but I will love you anyway. And so the minister who holds up the rose and says, who would want that? I hope somebody in the crowd shouted out really loudly, Jesus! Jesus wants that rose. Jesus wants the sniffed and damaged rose. He wants the one who is damaged goods. He knows the worst about each of us, and he says, I'm after you. Not because of your loveliness, but because of the shape and character of my love. You're precious. Jesus wants the rose. But at what cost? And that's our second point you can see there. A love that pays the cost and the price. Now you remember back to blind date. You remember how that works. Blind date says, I will love those who offer me something, who pay me a dividend. If I look good walking out on his arm, if he will make me feel good, if she will, fulfill my every dream, then brilliant, that's the one for me. That's not really love, is it? At best, it's sort of a casual compliment that you're something nice, but that's not love. No. Look at this, verse 3. Can you see it there? Verse 3. This is love. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. And then I told her, so verse 2 and verse 3, then I told her, you are to live with me for many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will live with you. Now the tragedy here is poor Gomer, she's got herself into such a state that she needs to be bought out of some sort of slavery. Back in those days, in those times, if you got yourself into financial difficulty, the only thing that you've got is not to become bankrupt, but to sell yourself and become a slave. Maybe in the film Gladiator, you've seen the slave markets, the marketplaces. They're very ugly places. Or it could be that she'd sold herself effectively to another lover, probably a pimp of some sort, and perhaps she'd lost her marketability. And he simply wanted to cut his losses and make whatever he could off this woman. But whatever happens, you can picture it in your scene. It would have been ugly. It would have been gross. There's a public marketplace and she is led in. The likelihood is that she is disrobed or virtually naked because people want to see what they're going to get. And then suddenly, before that, how does she face it? She's there. I don't know what's running through her mind. Maybe it's all the past regrets. If I was better off, why on earth did I do it? But you can almost guarantee that she got her eyes closed at the time because all her shame is on show. Perhaps even it was a town where she knew people who'd been at her wedding to Hosea. And so she closes her eyes and she just lets the inevitable, this thing that she's given herself into, take control of her. She's lost control of her destiny. The bidding begins, 10 shekels, 11 shekels, 12 I know that voice. She heard the voice. 13 shekels. 14 shekels. I know that voice. That's the voice of my husband. Why is he there? I know why he's there. He's come to take revenge. The bidding goes on. 15 shekels. 15 shekels and a whole stack of barley. Sold. You've got her. She's yours. And Hosea comes forward. He takes off his cloak and he robes it round Gomer and he leads her away. And she braces herself, waiting for the shouting and the screaming and the telling off. I know why he's bought me, because back in those days, an adulterous wife, the husband had the right to have her killed. I know why he's bought me, just so he can rub salt in my wounds and kill me. And yet look at verse 3. She's expecting this harshness and there's this tender answer. Then I told her, you are to live with me for many days. Literally in the original, you are to dwell with me. That wasn't what she expected. Gentleness, tenderness. You are to dwell with me as mine for many days. What? Think of the cost to Hosea. Think of we always play this game whenever we get a cob on with somebody. They started it. No, they can come to me. It's such a cost, isn't it, just to initiate the process. I'm not going to be the first one who puts this right. Hosea is the one who's been wronged, and he initiates. He moves. He goes into that place where his mates were watching. The cost we find because of that barley thing, the likelihood is that to do that, you do not just pay in shekels, but he's had to add other stuff. In other words, he's had to go to his cupboard and empty everything out that he's got. It has cost him, virtually bankrupted him. But neither of those two things compare with the shame. In a culture that was about appearance and upstanding, everyone saw. Everyone saw the way that she had tramped on him, marched off, and now he's got to go back and buy. She was his by rights, but he publicly had to be seen walking over and covering her shame. And you can imagine the scowls as he walked away, took her back to dwell with her. You see, real love always costs. Real love always requires some sort of sacrifice. Now, Stephen and Dorette are going to learn this very painfully over the next few years. When you've got a little kid, it's either them or you. So you can give yourself a nice, easy life and carry on thinking about yourself. But as that happens, this little kid that needs to be loved, nurtured, needs patience, sacrifice, self-giving, you can say, well, I'll live for me, and the child gets stuck, it's helpless, it's lost. Or else you can sacrifice some of the things that you feel are important, how you feel, usually sleep to start off with, but then it goes with your money, and later on, when they're a teenager, it's your emotional energy, and they leave you with your heart somewhere down on the floor, don't they? And you can say, no, I won't be bothered by it, but that's the nature of love. It's them or us. We have to sacrifice. That's the nature of real love. It always costs. And in verse 3, we found what it cost Hosea to love Gomer. It cost an initiation. It cost money, and it cost the shame. And in verse 4 and 5, we find out what it costs God to love you and me. For in verse 5, we read of what God is going to do in the future. He's going to give a time of quiet over this nation of Israel. But then there's going to come a day, we find, verse 5, afterwards the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. A time where King David, for any of you who know your story of the Old Testament, the Bible, you remember King David who fought Goliath. He's already dead. How can David come back if it's not one of his descendants? One of his descendants would come, who is a king. And we remember when John the Baptist came and said, the bridegroom is here, speaking of a descendant of David who would be king. His name was Jesus. And he did what we would have expected him to do. You see, Jesus, went into the marketplace in the days of his flesh in real history. He went into the marketplace at his own initiative. And we're told in the New Testament that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And at the cost, what a cost it was that bankrupted him, he paid for us to be free of the slaveries we've given ourselves into. Not with shekels, but with his own dear life as he died on a cross. In fact, the New Testament tells us clearly, there's a verse there that says, you were redeemed not with perishable things such as silver and gold, but with the precious blood of Christ. He dropped his blood so that we could be set free, opened up again to a new life of God. And if any of you know anything of the story of what happened on Good Friday, then you will know that he was stripped, he was made naked, he was shamed, and he was lifted up in front of all people, exposed. He was disrobed so that you and I could be robed with his perfect righteousness. You know, some of you here today struggle with shame, don't you? You desperately don't want people to look too deep in case they don't like what they see. Can I tell you that Jesus offers you the covering that you're looking for? He says, I will be naked so you can be clothed. And if I clothe you, you may never need fear being exposed again. I've done it. I've been through what you fear so that you don't have to. Imagine what would happen, how that would change us if we really took that in. He said, your unfaithfulness I will pay for. Such is my love for you. My love will pay the price, the cost, that you may come home. No matter what you've done, you may come home and dwell with me, no longer running to counterfeit alternatives, setting your hopes on things that won't fulfill, other gods, but come home and be loved. Let me be the husband that you've always looked for. If you have me, you will have all you need. I am the one who loves the unlovely. I am the one who loves the rose. So as I close now, I want to bring two things to all of you, and I'm guessing you're all in one of these two situations. These are two things that would stop us getting hold and hearing what the Lord is saying to us through His Word today. This is the first one. It could be that you think you're lovely. Now, you wouldn't put up your hand and object and say that out loud. You wouldn't say, Steve, I'm lovely. You're not that foolish. But perhaps you express it like this. You don't think it's too hard for God to love you. I'm an alright kind of person. And can I say, you probably haven't faced up to the way that you have treated God. If somebody treated you the way that you treat God, you have nothing more to do with them. Please get this, that when God says, I love you, He's not paying you a compliment. He's making you a promise. He's making a promise that though I know the worst about you, I can love you. That you're running after other lovers and only I can rescue you, and I will. Let me robe you, is what He's saying. Now there's another group of people in here, I'm guessing, who rather than saying, I think that I am lovely, who are more likely to be saying, I know that I'm unlovely. They know the rule that says we only love what is lovely. And so the idea that God would actually love the unlovely is really hard to take in. In fact, you may be sitting there thinking, this is wonderful, I wish it were true. It's true for the person sitting next to me, but it couldn't possibly be true for me. I've messed up, I've gone too far, I'm too ugly, I'm too dirty. Well, let me tell you that God is speaking to you today to say, I love you, and I have already loved you. I've loved you in Jesus Christ. Perhaps it's hard to take in, because sometimes we've all had experiences, some more than others, where other people have treated you badly and made you feel unlovable. Things have happened or things have been said that have left you just feeling soiled and worthless. Can I remind you that this is God speaking to you, not a person. And He says, I can love you, and I will love you. He has a love that knows the worst about you and will pay the price so that you can come and dwell with Him. So I don't care how much you've messed up today. I don't care whether you've slapped God in the face 1,000 times. Today, here, today, God is reaching out in love to each one of us here. So can I encourage you? Why not come back in and dwell with Him? Come in, say, Lord, I need you. The way we do this is we do it by praying, and I'm going to say a short prayer in a minute, but I'm going to tell you in advance what I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray along the lines of what we've heard. I'm going to pray, Lord, I'm sorry for the way that I've not loved you as I should and treated you as I should. Thank you that in Jesus Christ you have loved me anyway. Please, Lord, help me to come into you and have you as the great love in my life. That's what I'm going to pray in a minute. Some of you will want to pray that and make it yours today. Others of you will say, hold on, there's something in this, but I need to know a little bit more. And if that is you, then what I'd encourage you to do is say, Lord, if you are there and these things are true, would you bring me to the point where I can own this and have this for myself? So let us all pray. I wonder, Fiona, whilst we're doing this, could you go out and get Jane to play, please? Lovely. Let's all pray together. Sovereign Lord, we thank you that you have taken the initiative and you've invited us to come and dwell with you again. Lord, we wish to confess that we haven't loved you as we should have done. We've set our hearts on other things that all they've done is damage us. Some of them good, and yet we've loved them too much. Lord, please forgive us. Thank you that in Jesus Christ you have paid the price. You have taken on yourself the cost. That he would go and be stripped and be made naked in the marketplace so that we could be robed with his wonderful, precious righteousness. Thank you for that. And we ask now, Lord, that you would help us to be those who run back to you, knowing that you love the unlovely, knowing that you change and transform us, knowing, Lord, that you invite us to know your love and dwell with you for many days. Hear our prayer today, Lord, not because we deserve it, but because you're that kind of God in Christ. Amen. And we're going to sing to that end. This next song is called Salvation Belongs to Our God. He's the rescuer. He's the initiative taker. He's the price payer. He's the one who beckons us in. And this is a song of his salvation and his goodness. And I hope you can join and enjoy the privilege of singing it to him for all that he has done for us. We'll have the introduction and then we'll stand together.